Okay. First of all, to our audience here, thank you. It is the middle of the day, and we appreciate you taking the time as we try to get to a post-COVID world where we have hybrid events. And so your time is very valuable to us, and we appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today. And to our virtual audience, many thanks for you tuning in from wherever you are. This is the Institute for Strategic Policy Solutions, or as we like to call it, ISPS, and my name is Kimberly Jackson. I'm the executive director. This is our think tank that's embedded in the college, and it was created by Congressman Young as a way to make sure that we had positive solutions on nonpartisan issues, social, political, and economic, and to make sure that we are our convener for information. We educate, we engage, and we enhance conversations. We try to be a bridge between the nonprofit, the private, and the public sector. And we also try to enlighten our congressional leaders, municipal and county leaders on issues that matter to everyday people. And with that, I'd like to say thank you for joining our Clean Energy Program. We appreciate your patience today because we had one of our panelists who was unable to make it, and so we will be a mighty team of 3 today and just fine, but we wanted to say thank you again. Today, we are honored to thank WUSF and the Tampa Bay newspapers for their support. A huge thank you to the Assemblers who are absolutely present today for actually sponsoring this program, and to our anchor sponsor, Duke Energy. We thank you for allowing us to have a larger platform over this program year. Today we're running a program on clean energy, and these topics can seem very simple, but they are very complex. Before I introduce our lead panelists today, along with my co-moderator, I thought it was very interesting that today the Pinellas County Commissioners are actually voting on clean energy for our county right at 2 p.m. I found it also interesting that our county has done pretty well. St. Petersburg, Largo, Dunedin have all been instrumental in already adopting clean energy programs. And I think the most important part of this is that the conversation is evolving to how does it touch everyday Americans? How do we grow jobs? How do we interconnect average people to making changes that will help the footprint of our community, but also enhance our economic space? And with that, I'm going to turn to Lisa Perry and introduce her and say thank you for your time today. Lisa Perry is a senior manager of energy services for Walmart Incorporated. As part of the utilities team, Lisa works directly with utility companies across the United States regarding renewable energy programs, energy efficiency, vehicle electrification plans, and resiliency. Lisa also participates in regulatory utility proceedings in which the utility is seeking approval of various types of renewable energy offerings. Prior to joining Walmart, Lisa represented Walmart as outside counsel in general rate cases and renewable energy dockets before utility commissions in Colorado, Texas, New Mexico, Arkansas, and Louisiana. Thank you so much. And then also, further to my right, Vinny Tafura is our co-moderator, and he's been working with us this year. He is a visionary thinker, writer, entrepreneur, communications theorist, and economist, and he is the author of 2 books, Corporate Empathy and Unlocking the Labor Cage. He is a pioneer advocate for the 21st century economy, disrupting society's most rigid institution and beliefs. And of course, we have a microphone challenge, so we're just going to switch out microphones, and that's what happens when we do these things. Thank you. So, are we on? And so, without repeating all that, Vinny is an excellent person to have this conversation with. How about that?
Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, we're going to have questions. We also have the ability for you all to text questions, both virtually and in person. That screen will come up with the information. It's behind me, so I can't read it behind me, but you all can see it. Please take the time to send any questions. It'll come to my computer after we do our first part of the moderation, and then we'll ask any questions that you have of our panelists. Thank you. Vinny?
So, Kimberly, thank you. Lisa, thank you for being here and making the trip to St. Petersburg. I guess the first question I want to ask is describe the role of clean energy at Walmart.
Okay. This is working? Yes. And before I get started, I wanted to say, because I know I live in Arkansas and I've lived in all these different places, but I was actually born in Lakeland, raised in Tampa, went to USF undergrad, University of Florida Law School, and I'm still going to say go Gators.
Do
So
it. Just do it.
So I am personally invested in not only Florida, but Central Florida, and I'm very excited to be here, and I'm excited. I left Florida in 2000. I've been gone for 20 years, and so I'm always excited to be able to come back and see the progress that's being made. But at Walmart, I was outside counsel with Walmart for a few years, and I've been with Walmart for the last 2 years. And to really understand kind of their role in clean energy, you have to go back to 2005, when the leaders at Walmart set this really just aspirational goal to be 100% renewable in our operations. When I came on board and started working as outside counsel, Walmart had kind of focused in those goals and said, no, we're going to be 50% renewable power and reduce emissions in our operations by 18% by 2025, and we are still on target to do that. Last year, they went even a step further and made a commitment to be 100% renewable power in our operations, all of our facilities, distribution centers, supercenters, Sam's Clubs, by 2035. And I think kind of the bigger challenge is zero emissions across global operations without offsets by 2040. And this includes electrifying all of our stores, which I know in Florida, a lot of times everything's all electric anyway, but in other states, we use natural gas for heating and cooking. And then also, I think a really big challenge for us is our fleet vehicles. We are one of the largest trucking companies in the United States. And so to basically get rid of all that tailpipe emissions by 2040. And then also, we've taken kind of an additional step by being, I hate saying this word, a regenerative company because I always mess it up, but to help protect, manage, and restore 50 million acres of land and 1 million square miles of ocean. That's where we stand today, and that's part of my job.
That's impressive. I guess I have a follow-up question to that, and there was a Florida Politics article last month that was quoted. Eric Brewer from Walmart, Senior Director of Public Affairs, had said that, I guess, described the relations described as the evolution from a siloed practice within Walmart to something that's kind of become part of the whole ecosystem.
Yeah, so I work, Walmart is the largest employer in the world. We have, I think, about 2.3 million employees. And I work at the home office. And within us, we have an energy department. And our department is one of the largest energy departments for a private business. It's about 60 to 70 people, and we're continuing to grow. And I think one of the efforts that they're trying to make internally within our department is that we do work on teams, but we're starting to have better communication between teams so that, if we've got a team that's doing on-site solar, they're talking to my team who works directly with utilities because, when you put on-site solar on a big company like Walmart, it may impact the utility, and just really trying to have everyone with better communication and coordinated effort.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So you've mentioned a lot. I'm happy to know your connection to Florida because that makes a lot of sense about your passion. But can you explain the larger picture of where the country is on this clean energy grid and break it down in this of you've lived in so many states of what that means, particularly to where states fall in their progress?
Yeah, that is actually a really great question. And I think one of the interesting parts of my job is to be involved in these different states. I mean, personally, I file testimony and participate in dockets across, I think I counted 14 different states, and they range from Colorado to Kentucky to Texas, to Arkansas and Virginia. And, I think every state, as we know, is going to be a little different, and they're going to have their own internal challenges. And I think they are in sort of a different place along this process, but they all, and I would say even more so over the last couple of years, are becoming more and more interested and engaged in transitioning their states to clean energy. And so, for example, we've had several dockets in Virginia because the Virginia legislature passed, last year or the year before, the Virginia Clean Economy Act, which is saying to their utilities, hey, we want you to have renewable power, and they've got, certain mandates by certain years. And so help putting that into play. I'm involved in one right now in Colorado, where the Colorado legislature essentially did the same thing. And so, and I know that there have been dockets. The commission can open up their own dockets and say, hey, we just want to explore this idea. And I've seen that done in Louisiana. And, you know, so it seems like it's becoming a sort of more of a focus, just slowly across the entire U.S., and it's been great.
And so in preparation for this, I just asked average people, you know, what do you think about clean energy? What does it mean to you? And I'm surprised at the lack of responses. And so it makes me think we have to do a huge educational lift to bring some of these terms to everyday use as to why the average person cares and why it matters. So as we're working with congressional leaders, how do we have that filter down to everyday Americans who are not as dialed into environmental issues and want to know the impact on them?
Oh, that's a great question. And I feel for them because I came from the legal world. And so I had to learn a whole new vocabulary as well. You know, I know a lot, I work a lot with utilities directly. And utilities really do have great access to the customers. And I know that they try to also inform their customers if they have a renewable energy program, you know, that they could sign up for. Outside of that,
It's a hard question.
it's a hard question, you know, because, I mean, I guess you've got social media. I mean, everybody's looking, you know, at their phones and their computers, and that does seem like a great way to disseminate even really good, helpful information. It's just a matter of making sure that it does get to people, and it sounds like it's not. So, yeah, I have to think about that one.
Thank you.
Well, speaking back to everyday people in that way, though, what does the clean energy impact for local jobs and in any kind of specific sectors and whatnot? What kind of influence or impact has that had?
You know, it's been my experience that, you know, when you have a new renewable program coming on board, let's say a solar array or a wind farm, you're going to have a lot of jobs initially in the construction phase, which is about a year and a half, and then that will taper off to some jobs for the continued operation and maintenance. But where I think the biggest opportunity lies for us is in the research and development side, because I know Walmart, when I was just talking about our goals, and you know, we're talking no tailpipe emissions by 2040 from our fleet vehicles. I don't even know that the technology exists right now to do that. And so I know companies like Walmart and other companies and utilities who are trying to get to these, you know, sustainability goals. We need, you know, bright, creative problem solvers working on advancing our current technology, developing new technologies that we haven't even thought of yet. And then you also have the implementation side. You know, it's my job. You know, I love my job. It's a great opportunity to really get into the thick of it and help a major company like Walmart get over the finish line with its sustainability goals. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity out there.
I'm a fan of more researchers.
Yes, R&D.
So then how has the industry been impacted, and specifically Walmart, because of COVID? Has it increased? Has, you know, in terms of productivity, understanding that we do have to do transition a lot of our life within the sustainability field? What would you say?
You know, it was interesting during COVID. Walmart actually was in communication with other businesses. And as we all know, businesses were affected differently by COVID. And certainly there were businesses that were forced to close for extended periods of time. And one of the things that we got out of it, and this may be very specific because it's what I do, but when working with utility programs on developing, or working with utilities on developing renewable programs, one of the things that came out of COVID is that businesses who were in these long-term contract programs, their economics changed. And, you know, they were having cash flow issues, and all of a sudden they had these, you know, hard commitments. And so, you know, now when we work with utilities, we bring up the idea of maybe, you know, having programs that offer like month to month. And so as, you know, a customer's economics change, you know, and then really that's a business or a residential, that they do have a way to leave the program.
That's excellent. To the small business side of that, what advice would you have for small businesses to embrace clean energy and these new technologies?
You know, I would say there are I know, like in Arkansas, we have NGOs that, we have all size businesses that are members. And like one of the ones that I'm on the board for is the Arkansas Advanced Energy Economy. And I would guess that every state has a few of those. And I think that those are great to find and to get involved with, because that keeps you connected into not only the community of people who are actually doing it, but they also work at the legislative level. And I know Florida, their utilities are regulated, and a lot of renewable energy opportunities come from your utilities. And that's an area where most people just pay their electric bill and don't think anything else of it. I mean, that's the way I was. And so it's really just getting hooked in with those organizations that can help educate you on what your commission is doing. Like what programs are out there, because maybe you haven't paid attention to the mailers that you get, and stuff like that. And so that's what I would say, is to really find those local NGOs and try to join and be active.
Yeah, excellent. I think Duke Energy has a number of those programs.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they actually do. And so I think I've said this before in other programs. We actually had a clean energy program with Kathy Castor in January. And then we had a program with Duke Energy just in terms of leadership. It had turned into the program on solar panels because they gave a significant donation to create a program at St. Petersburg College to ensure that our students are getting jobs in the area that help in this area. So they've been very, very instrumental in educating the public and putting dollars that lead to jobs, that lead to future education, that leads to equity, which is sort of what we were talking about in the back. And so since I just brought up the term, tell me about how, we were talking about the average person trying to engage in understanding, but purchasing, for example, a generator, coming to Walmart and trying to make the product affordable for them to utilize, to not only participate in clean energy and understanding their environmental footprint, but also out of necessity of life, particularly in areas like in Florida where that matters and could save lives. Tell me about some of the what Walmart is, or what you hope that they could do in that space to help. And I know Walmart's known for helping in this space.
Well, I know one of the things that we've been focusing on, especially in areas that are prone to hurricanes and extreme weather events, we had this happen recently in Louisiana, is really trying to be able to get our stores up and running as quickly as possible. We have some stores that actually have on-site generators. And we'd love to have them at every store, but they're $1 million a piece. So we target where we put them, and along the Florida coast is one of them, and like I said, Louisiana, and along the coastline of Texas, with the goal of, if we can get our store up and running as quickly as possible, then people in the community can get to that store. We sell generators for households, but we also sell a lot of other necessities, whether it's, baby food, diapers, canned goods, cleaning supplies. And so that's what one of our big presses, even for my team. In fact, we've been doing a couple tours. We did what we called the Gumbo Tour, and then we did the Peach Tour. We're actually going to be doing one in Florida, the Orange Tour. Where we're actually sitting down and meeting with utilities and saying, how can you help us get our stores up and running quicker when you have a hurricane go through, so that we can start helping to restore the community. And we also provide supplies to first responders. We had, in Louisiana, we gave pallets and pallets of water to the local utility, the guys who were trying to, go out onto the streets and restore the power. And so that's, to us, it's like the sooner we can get up and running and the sooner we can help the community, then we can give them access to whatever it is they need to be able to get their lives back together.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I didn't think about it that way when I was asking the question, but that makes complete sense. If the businesses are intact, if the businesses are ready for business and they can continue to do that work, then the community is up and running much quicker and has access to services. So in that regard, you said you're meeting with utilities across the country, but how are you working with the federal government and local entities to also send this message of why Walmart matters in this space and how you can work with them?
With the federal government, I don't do too much at that particular level. Most of my involvement is at the state level, and really even taking it down to the local utility, whether it's an investor-owned utility or a municipally owned or a co-op. So generally, we have found that there's really two ways to work with a utility. You can do it collaboratively beforehand in a conference room, or you can do it before the commission in a hearing, process. And, we do both. And we'd rather do the former than the latter. And I would say a lot of progress has been made, in part because I think of the effort of my supervisor, who has really been very focused on developing relationships and cultivating those relationships, that we can sit down and have these conversations with the utilities and come together and develop these, like you were talking about Duke Energy Florida with the Clean Energy Connection. I mean, we were involved in that conversation so that we can help hopefully put together utility programs that all customers can benefit from, not just C&I customers, but residential customers who maybe can't put solar on their rooftop. Maybe they rent, or maybe they live in an apartment building. But to make it something that's attractive to the utility, attractive to customers, because it can't always be, I've got to pay more if I want renewable. It's got to be something that is affordable, and also something that the commission will approve, because ultimately these all have to get approved by the commission. And so that has really been our push, is just really trying to work this out on the front end. And so then we can go into the commission with a program that we think is really good, and it still has to be vetted. But then, it's more likely the commission says, yes, that's great. And that is much better than going in with me filing testimony telling a utility why we don't like their program.
Vinny, I have another question before you jump in. It just had me thinking about your comment about globalism. And how do you find the challenges that we are facing versus your Walmarts all around that you have to deal with clean energy challenges?
You mean like from a store level? Yeah. It's a good question. So with our stores, we do have some that have on-site solar. I think we have about 600 across the country that do. I would say most of our stores, we're trying to work with the utilities and using their renewable programs through their tariffs. So it just probably depends on where the stores are located. I mean, when we're picking which stores to put solar on, I mean, there's a lot of, and that's a different team that does that, but there's a whole host of factors that they have to look into about where that next location is going to be. So, and we have, I want to say it's over 5,000 facilities across the United States. And so, yeah, it's for us, it's scale. Everything we do is such a large scale, that you always have to be very strategic and very patient, and yeah. Thank you.
Vinny, do you want to jump in before I look?
Yeah, I've got, want to move on to the submitted questions?
Unless you have some other questions, because so thank you for your technological space. As we go back into a hybrid environment, I have to transition to see if we have questions from our virtual audience, but if you can continue, that'd be great.
Yeah, let me, so one of the things is how are these technologies changing, or how do you see them changing? You said earlier that a lot of the stuff to meet these goals may not even be invented yet. Mm-hmm. Where do you see those developing partnerships, or Walmart investing in those? Where do those changes come from in your eyes?
Well, I think from my little slice of Walmart, I know that we are looking a lot at working with resiliency and having that backup generation capability, but there is no renewable backup generator. You're having to use either natural gas or diesel. And so that is definitely some technology that really needs to move forward and evolve for us, so that we can have, because we all hear about with what happened with Texas, there's been a lot of talk about the intermittency of renewables and reliability, and how can we make sure that when people flip the switch, their lights are going to turn on. And, part of that to me is kind of going towards backup generation that can run off of some sort of renewable power. We always are talking about batteries to try to fill in some of the intermittency gaps. California has the famous duck curve, where the sun shines when people aren't quite home yet, and then they get home and the sun stops shining. So I think a lot of that existing technology, there's some improvements to be made there. I was talking about our fleet. Electrifying a Class 8 tractor trailer, batteries are heavy. And those trucks have to be weighed, and they can't weigh over a certain amount. So if you have a big, heavy battery sitting in your truck, you have less cargo that you can transport. Also, they take really big, powerful chargers to be able to charge one of them in a reasonable amount of time. You just can't hook one of those up to your utility. I mean, you'll blow a transformer. So there's a lot, so we're looking at some hybrid technology, like maybe hydrogen fuel cells. So, I think, for us, those are some of the challenges that we're facing as a company to just try to work through our sustainability goals. But knowing that there are a lot of really bright, creative people who are working on it and will help us get there. Like I said, if it's improving the existing technology that we know about, and then something we haven't even thought of. Because if you'd have told me about the internet in high school, I would have told you were crazy. And yet now we're so dependent upon it. So it's out there.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that sentiment.
Ditto on the comment on the internet, although we're aging ourselves right now in front of students. It's back to what you said about scale. This is a lot. The innovation is important. We have some questions. He has some questions that were previously submitted, so we can go back and forth for a while. But this is a question from one of our participants. Has Walmart considered solar lease program with local utilities?
And I don't know the answer of that question directly. I do know that we lease some of our solar panels. Mm-hmm. I just don't know if that's done with local utilities or with third-party vendors.
Okay. These are complicated questions. The more I started taking a deep dive, the more I realized it's like this, you have a hard job. These are complicated questions. Do you want to go on?
Yeah. So how does Walmart work with other industry players? How is the industry moving as a whole in either retail and I guess on the trucking side even, what are the best practices? Are they sharing that? Or how does that work? We talked about small business. How is this working at the large corporate level?
Yeah, well, you have scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Right now, we work with vendors too, and their renewable energy and sustainability goals. And I think I don't know how long it's been in place, but it's been in place for a few years. We have Project Gigaton. There's information about it on our corporate website, where we have challenged our vendors to say, hey, help us reduce carbon emissions. And they are huge companies. I know one is PepsiCo, and there are other ones that are also. And so right now, we've really just been trying to partner with our vendors and say, let's do this together, because we can't do it alone. And they can't do it alone. So that's what, basically we've been trying to work collaboratively. I don't know if we'll ever get to where you have to do a vendor, but for right now, it's always been through collaborative effort, and it's working very well. We're getting very good response from our vendors.
Excellent. Thank you.
So what is you mentioned that, and that's a great example of the question I'm about to ask you about collaboration with vendors, but what does your day-to-day look like advocating for Walmart? For the average person who is still trying to compile what you do on behalf of the Walmart on this clean energy scale, can you explain a little bit more in depth?
Sure. It's funny. I asked my husband the other day, I'm like, what do you tell people when they ask you what I do? It was much easier when I was just a lawyer. He's like, she's just a lawyer. But what I do is, when you think about the whole clean energy movement, and sort of thinking it from the lawyer's perspective, the highest level is your state legislature. They're going to enact laws that can put mandates on your utilities. You got to reduce, have so much of your generation from renewable by a certain year. Then it goes down, if you're in a regulated state like Florida, to your Public Service Commission, and they kind of help implement, the laws from the legislature. And then you've got your local utility. And you don't have a choice, right? I don't know what your utility is here in St. Pete. I know in Tampa it's TECO. Yeah. So, those are kind of the three levels. And I sit mainly in the second and third levels. So I work a lot, with at the commission level. So I know this is probably a new process because it was for me. Even as a lawyer, I didn't even know this existed. But when a utility wants to get, TECO wants to get a program approved, they have to go through the state commission. And it's a docket, it's opened up, it's public. And you can have parties who are interested intervene in that docket, and Walmart is one of those parties as a large customer. And so that's where my role is I'm actually an expert witness on behalf of Walmart. and I file testimony in these dockets saying, we like the program, we don't like the program, we think it could be better if you did this. And then that, it goes through the process, and the commission eventually decides whether to approve the program, approve it as is, maybe make some changes. Then, like I said, also we work directly with utilities, hopefully before we get to the commission room, to help develop these programs. And then also, doing this and talking on panels. And that's probably the three main ways that my voice gets heard on behalf of Walmart for what we're doing and sort of how we are able to get to these sustainability goals.
That's good. Thank you.
So kind of going back to the silo growth to the whole culture, how are kind of the frontline employees of Walmart, are they engaged in this idea, to look for places to save and do ideas bubble up from within?
Probably the most, probably mostly in our energy efficiency efforts, because that's going to be at the store level. So, for example, we replace the light bulbs with energy efficient light bulbs. In our stores, a lot of them have skylights, that as the sun is brighter, the bulbs go dimmer. And so those are a lot of our store level efforts in the HVAC system or the refrigeration system that the store managers or employees are probably more aware of. I wouldn't be surprised if I walked into Walmart and said, did you know that we have someone like me who works at a home office and does what I do? They'd probably be like, no. But they do know about what we're doing within the stores themselves to try to decrease our usage.
Gotcha.
In your advocacy, there's another question from a participant, and they want to know if you can talk more about challenging other vendors and what strategies you use, and do you use a stick or a carrot or just a moral compass, which is interesting because you could say that about a lot of topics. But.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, right now we are working collaboratively with our vendors through the Project Gigaton, and I think so far we've just gotten very good response from them. And, we work with a lot of large companies who, even without Walmart, have their own sustainability goals. So it's really, more of, I think, parties who are kind of facing the same direction, walking down that path, helping each other.
How do you get customers more involved in this process of understanding? It's one of the questions that is kind of hard in the role that you do. You talk about being an expert witness and explaining to them how the policies are going to impact your footprint and why it's important. But how does that translate to a customer who might also want to get involved because they are supportive of Walmart because of their policies?
Well, that's actually a great question, because when you asked me the earlier question about educating, I thought, I should have a better answer, because we have how many people walk into a Walmart every single day? And it makes me think, is there a way that we could do a better job educating the people who walk in, even if it's educating them on what that particular store is doing to decrease its energy usage? Because you probably have never noticed whether a typical Walmart has skylights. And now maybe when you go in, you'll look up and you'll see, and you'll be like, hey, there's those skylights she was talking about. And I think that, personally, and this is just from me, I think that we could do a better job at the store level to let our customers know what we're doing to not only decrease our energy usage, but even what I'm doing with, hey, this store is now powered 75% by renewable energy. Yeah, that's actually a really great idea.
Do you want to jump in? Because I know you're an advocate in this space.
I guess in looking at how things have changed over time, and I'll go, for a while, the U.S. had pulled out of the Paris Accord. Did anything change during that time period at Walmart, or did you start growing?
No, I want to say that over the last couple of years, we've just, I think, even more committed, especially last year when we announced our last sustainability goals, to really trying to, really the carbon emissions, trying to get carbon out of the air. I feel like we've only just pressed harder.
Excellent. Thank you.
So we're a cluster of about 28 colleges within the Florida college system. and we partner collaboratively. And this is a great question. I don't know if this is a student, professor, dean, or other, but how can an entity like St. Petersburg College partner with Walmart, if at all? One thing I think that we're doing a good job is with partnering within our county, within businesses that have a national footprint or a global footprint.
One thing that comes to mind, because I've actually been thinking about this with the University of Arkansas College of Law, is, I know when I went to law school at the University of Florida, which is a wonderful law school, I didn't know this even existed, as an area for a lawyer. And I wonder, I don't know if other undergraduate programs, but I really think that I know anyone at Walmart is willing to go in and talk to classes about what we're doing, about the job potential that is there in this industry, and how students, the minds of today that we need to help us get over the finish line, can be a part of that. And so one of the things that I'm going to suggest to do is to teach at the University of Arkansas, if they'll let me, to just sort of let lawyers know this is an area of law, and that this is something you may be interested in getting into, because I think sometimes it ends up being an overlooked topic.
Yeah, I think the college speaking tour is definitely a worthwhile endeavor. I do a number of speaking like that, and because they are the ones they need the seeds planted of what the potentials are. What do we have here? As far as, and I guess this goes to maybe some of the solar programs, any Walmarts that have solar, do they do anything within the plazas that they're in with other small businesses that are located? Because I know sometimes Walmarts are like an anchor to a plaza, if that's been explored at all?
You know what? I don't know. I don't know if we had like a shared solar installation with other businesses. I just don't know the answer to that question. Sorry.
No problem.
It's a wonderful opportunity if we haven't.
I mean, I think the one thing that you, just by saying that, is that there are a ton of questions in this field where it's evolving all the time. It is sort of like the comment you made about the internet, where we didn't know anything and now we know everything, or at least we think we do. So how do you navigate different political spaces from state to state? Which I think is a really great question, because we all have different focuses on clean energy. Some of us might care more about the environment from a state perspective, not a personal perspective, and some people might just care about the impact of jobs. When I was researching this, they were talking about Midwestern states that have the land and the space to produce some of the hardware that's required for this wonderful energy to connect us state to state. And then we have environmental coastal states who care more about what is happening to our environment and ultimately climate challenges that result from us not doing it right the first time. So what are your thoughts about how you navigate this political process?
I feel like I'm constantly navigating the political process because it's very true. And when you, having now worked in so many different states, you have to go in being very realistic about what is most important to that state and being respectful. I don't go in judging a state for being one way or the other. Hey, Colorado, you had me at renewables. Maybe another state, I want to talk about job opportunities because that's more important. Because I respect the fact that every state has their own residents, they have their own challenges, they have their own priorities. And so for me, it's going in there and just being mindful of what that is, and then being realistic about what that particular commission would be willing to do. We worked on a docket across 4 different states. You had 4 different commissions for, I think, 3 wind farms in Oklahoma. 3 of the states said yes, 1 state said no. And it's because, in part because they didn't feel like it was a good deal for their customers, they didn't feel like it was needed, and they didn't feel like it was going to bring the jobs. And, it's fair enough. I mean, that is certainly their prerogative to do that. And so I guess I would say I navigate it by just being respectful.
Do they ever come to you ahead of time? You mentioned that there are 2 ways. You can try to work with them ahead of time or then go through the commission process. Do people ever, or entities or utilities ever come to you asking your advice before you get to that collaborative process?
Yes, we've gotten there. We have, like I said, my supervisor has done a fantastic job really trying to build and cultivate that relationship with our utilities. And, you know, a lot of times too, especially with the larger utilities, they have key account managers. And so we have someone within the utility who, you know, works for our account and other, you know, larger customers. That is sort of our go-to. And so, yeah, we have been, and I think that's probably one of the biggest drivers for moving renewable energy forward is utilities coming to large. It's not just Walmart, they go to other customers as well, and talking to us beforehand.
Do we have another audience?
We have, they're coming, as we're coming. What advice do you have for students that might want to follow in your path or Walmart more generally?
Oh, that's a good. Well, as you can tell, my path was a winding one. I actually started out in estate planning and probate. Then I represented the oil and gas industry. How about that for about 12 years? And then here I am helping.
That's a big jump.
It is. It's a big jump, but it's been wonderful because I've seen a lot of sides to this topic. You know, for me, it's always just been keeping your mind open and looking for opportunities. You know, the very first time I was approached to represent Walmart, I'd never done anything in this space whatsoever. And I still remember looking at that email from my now supervisor asking if I wanted to represent Walmart, of all, you know, the biggest corporation in the world. And I had written the email going, yes, I'd love to. And I'm thinking, am I really going to hit send? And I did. But I think it was really just, you know, seeing something that you love and not being afraid to just go into an area maybe you just know this much about and being willing to learn. And knowing that it's just going to take you some time to learn the vocabulary that I had to learn. And with Walmart in particular, you know, we're always looking for talent and for great innovators and great thinkers. Unfortunately, well, I say unfortunately, but really fortunately, sometimes you have to move to Northwest Arkansas. I actually really like it there. But, and I know other companies too, you know, they're also, you hear it on the news all the time, another company announcing, you know, their sustainability goals. All of these companies are going to need someone to help them implement them, someone to do what I do, which is talk to the utilities. You know, maybe you don't have to be a lawyer to be an expert witness, you know, going into the commissions, or maybe even just dealing with it at the legislative level. But there really is a lot of opportunity because I think and more so going forward because you have so many more companies who are going to commit to it.
So I had it. Shoot, I had a question.
That's okay. That's okay. I can jump in for a second. Like,
I had a brilliant answer to it.
Did you? Yes, yes. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I wanted to know if you ever work with your competitors in this space.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So I don't want to guess who your competitors are, so I'll let you speak on how you work with your competitors on clean energy topics and advocacy.
You know, sometimes we will see them in dockets. Sometimes we work with them on what I was telling you about, you know, organizations at that level. Sometimes, you know, we'll just have conversations with them. Hey, we're doing this. What are you guys doing? You know, you think about competition, but, you know, trying to clean up the air and make the planet better. I mean, that's the definition of healthy competition. And that's some place where we do try to work collaboratively with even, you know, like, you know, Amazon and Target and you know, other large retailers.
So I guess on to an extension of that is, what has been the response from shareholders and investors over the last number of years?
You know, I guess I can't really speak specifically to shareholders and investors. I do know that our current CEO, Doug McMillon, has really made this a focus. And you know, he's an amazing CEO, and you know, Walmart is doing very well. And I think as long as the company is doing well, I would imagine shareholders will be pretty happy. But I think too that, you know, there are shareholders who also care about the environment. They're not just caring about money. And I would think, and you know, I'm a shareholder, I'm an employee, and I have shares in Walmart. And I think that, you know, there are going to be more and more shareholders over time who are happy with what we're doing and able to do it in a way, you know, that helps grow the company. I mean, that's a win-win for us. It's a win for the environment, and it's, you know, a win for everybody who lives on this planet.
I'm really glad to see that and hear that, because I think the culture has changed quite a bit in the last decade around clean energy and making it where it's just kind of standard operating.
So I mentioned in the beginning that our Pinellas County Commission is voting on something very similar, and that I think our county has done a pretty good job, cities and municipalities indicating their preference to be a part of clean energy and practices. So you're working with commissions and you're working at the state level. How do you think when local municipalities and counties implement similar goals, does that strengthen what you do, or how do you feel like that impacts the market in terms of how we address clean energy?
Well, I would think that it would certainly strengthen it, because in my experience, the more voices you have, the more diverse those voices are, I think the louder they become. Also, I live in the world of what they call investor-owned utilities, or IOUs, which are the regulated for-profits like Duke Energy, FPL, TECO. But you have a lot of other utility companies out there. You have co-ops and you have municipally owned utilities. And they are also, not all of them are regulated by the commission. And so they are also, really putting this as a focus and taking an interest in how they can offer more, renewable power to their customers.
What last thing would you like to say, since you have the platform to share such an interesting topic with what you do? I mean, you have a very unique position in a huge market with a well-known entity that all of us know. What would you like to share more about what you do before we close out?
I guess I would say, having, like I said, kind of taken this very winding road to where I am, and just seeing the future, especially over the last couple of years, and the interest and the growth. Having worked for the oil and gas industry, there are so many skills and really smart people out there. And I hate to see something this important become a polarizing issue. I really do. Because I know in the oil and gas industry, there are a lot of really smart people who work in that industry, and they are fantastic, and I know that they want clean air too. And so for me, my wish is always, and I can't believe a lawyer is going to say this, my wish is for everyone to really start to work together. And, when you've got the oil and gas industry and you've got environmental groups and NGOs, instead of sitting in each other's blind spots, how can we really bring all of this to the table so that everybody can be a part of this transition into renewable energy? Because I think there's a lot of opportunity there for maybe industries that didn't think about it originally, like oil and gas. And students, who are looking at it. I mean, it's wide, it's broad, it's deep, and I think, if you have an interest, I think there's probably a space for you in, trying to help transition to renewable energy.
Thank you so much. I think there is a space. I'm like, my mind is always racing when I'm talking to people like you. There's probably a space in every field that you can imagine to engage in this emerging market that's not emerging, it's been there, but it's now becoming more known to the general public about how they can engage. When you talked about St. Petersburg College, I can think of a number of our departments that could support this space. So I want to thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
So before we close out, we'd like to always promote our upcoming programs. We have 2 more and a couple of recorded programs that we'll be promoting, but our next 2 programs are very student-focused, and we're very proud to be a convener in the space where students engage, and that's with our Great Debate, which will be on November 16th. Every year, the Institute supports this debate where all of our campuses sort of compete, and then the winners come to a huge gathering to debate. The topic this year is on mandates in COVID, and you can go to our website to look at some of our previous debates, but we're excited for the challengers to come and to show their skills. And then after that, we have a program with China. It's going to be our first international program that we're going to attempt. We're really excited about that. And this program is going to be focused on cybersecurity and the impact of TikTok and the impact of social space. So it's sort of divided because, of course, China's on a different time zone. So we're excited to have their professors, our professors, their students, and our students engage in that space. I want to again thank our sponsors, some of whom are present, for their support for this program. We can't do it without our sponsors. And I want to say that if you want to learn more about the Institute, you can follow us on Instagram, on Facebook. You can go to our YouTube channel where we house most of our programs. All of our programs are recorded and timely. Give us a couple of weeks. We post them as soon as we can. And you can also just go to our website, isps.spcollege.edu, to learn more about what we do, why we care, and how we engage, enhance, and educate the community on issues like this. Thank you so much again.